Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Ali Coram and Ed Carson here with a look at the action in today's session and a look at how the week turned out. And boy, Ed, it does seem like we ended the week with an exclamation point.
Certainly did. A lot of great action today. I want to take a look at Taiwan Semiconductor, a big driver of today's news, MercadoLibre, and General Electric.
Okay, we'll take a look at those three stocks. But first, let's take a look at the major indexes. So today, the Nasdaq finishing with a gain of more than 2%. The S&P 500 up 1.6%, the Dow up 1.2%, and the Russell 2000 up 1.1%. So Ed, what is behind the big gain today?
One of the things was Taiwan Semiconductor coming out with strong sales, suggesting that's a positive sign for the customers that it works with, like Apple and NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Broadcom, also the suppliers that it buys from. So that really lifted the chip sector. It was just a strong day. There was other action here. I like, not only did we rebound from Thursday, which arguably would have been nice to have had a pullback for a few days, but can't get too upset when the NASDAQ decides to go up 2%. It cleared the October highs. All the major indexes are above their October highs. Even if you did a loose trend line, not, we used to draw some tight trend lines, but now if you do it on the sort of the tops of things, you can get above. So, some resistance levels here. That's a positive sign. Maybe we can move up to 14,000 or a little bit above that would be the next kind of levels up, the 14,100 area. So looking good. Leading stocks are looking good. There's more breadth in that regard. The market breadth itself is not so great.
Mm-hmm. Ed, the question now, though, is, clearly it seems like the bulls are in control here. That can change at any time, but right now in control. For the month already, though, the NASDAQ up 7.4%. So if we weren't, due for a pause before, after the prior week's strong move, it seems like now perhaps we are even more due for a pause. Doesn't mean we have to. But what should we be thinking about in terms of adding exposure? Because I know earlier in the week, there was potentially this concern about if I add exposure here when a stock is actionable, is the market just going to pull back? Today, it showed, no, we want to run some more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So you don't want to you got to balance it back and forth. And I think the key is to add incrementally. If the market's acting well and, leading stocks are providing buying opportunities, keep on doing it, but do it gradually. Obviously anybody who bought yesterday probably wasn't hurt too much because today we just ran past those highs. But if we did pull back 4 or 5%, like we pulled back, if you bought a ton today, that would not be great. So if you were just buying since, the follow through day on November 1st and just incrementally, probably getting a pretty decent exposure at this point. So that's the way to go. And if the market keeps running, you're in pretty good position. And if the market pulls back, you're not going to be too badly hurt. So yeah, that's the thing, gradual, and just keep on doing that as long as the market is telling you to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's take a look at the S&P 500 as well, seeing it get back above not only the October highs, but this round number at 4,400. So that seems somewhat significant, Ed.
Yeah, it came down towards the test the 50-day line yesterday. So it was like, is that going to come down? And it's like, nope, right through it. So really important couple of moves here. Yeah, trend line as well. So this was a big resistance area as well to get above here. Would we get a pause just like with the NASDAQ? Sure, we could. And, there's economic data, inflation reports, some other news that certainly could get us to do that. But it certainly has the overall flavor is very bullish right now.
It is. And I feel like it's validating what we've been saying is even though traders may have gotten frustrated by potential follow through date, well, not potential follow through day signals, potential new uptrends marked by follow through days that we had in the brief rallies in the prior two attempts in this downtrend that created the three waves down may have gotten especially bearish at the lows. But if you use history as your guide and start adding exposure on a follow through day, it can really pay off. So those out there who stuck with it and didn't give up and stayed engaged in the market, hopefully are seeing that payoff now.
Yeah, and I think those prior failed follow-throughs are reasons why you should go in, but incrementally. Like if
Mhm.
you had jumped full hog and weren't quick to cut your losses in those earlier ones, you paid the price. Now it's like, oh, if you were super aggressive on number first, okay, well, it's working for you, but it may not. And so going in quickly but carefully is sort of like prudent bullishness when the market is giving those signals is just the way that's going to work the best over time.
Right. And it did feel like this follow through day was a little different in terms of the breadth that we had, at least anecdotally, maybe not showing up through to the advanced decline line, but it just felt like there were more setups and breakouts and the volume. So, whereas before the follow through days, think, on the NASDAQ, we had an increase of volume, but not above average volume. And maybe we didn't get that on the 11-1, but we started seeing more volume coming in to support the move higher. So at least as of now, it's feeling a little different. Again, could that all change? Yes. So, okay. Next on the list, let's take a look at quickly at the Dow and the Russell, like we like to do. The Dow making some headway above 34,000. The Russell has been lagging. And for the week, let's take a look at the weekly performance. So it was a down week here for small cap. So a potential area of concern here.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the concerns when we were talking about it internally a little bit before the show is like, I mean, it's only part of the gains from the prior week, but look, I mean, whereas the major indexes held support, cleared some resistance, this one, hit resistance and fell back, so it's just a very different story in small caps.
It is, but there are leaders out there we do see. Also, in terms of breadth, let's take a look at RSP. So down about 0.6% for the week, but maybe at a lot of stocks that have been moving higher in early November now pulling back to form handles here, you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely could be some of that, and so this looks better than the Russell, that's for sure. And I would say that QQEW looks even better. I mean, that one gives you more of a sense of, yeah, there's actually some breadth and leadership. I mean, this is not running up like QQQ, but it's got handles. You see that moving, that one was moving out. Yeah, QQQ was really moving up there, but QQEW, that's still big caps. But there's a lot of software names, a lot of some chip makers that aren't gigantic that were moving, the last few days. So there's reasons to know that's one reason why you can say, well, there's actually a lot of stocks you can buy, and not everything's in tech, but this gives you a flavor of that when you look at the Russell and you go, man, is it just 5 stocks? And this one says, no, it's not just 5 stocks.
Yes. Let's also take a look at the chip sector because you talked about Taiwan Semi. It was a big day for chips, SMH up 4%, but also a big week with SMH up 5.2% by week's end, clearing a trend line after getting above the 10-week line last week.
Yeah, I wish there was some more volume on this, but that's but nonetheless, there's a lot of things, and you could argue with Nvidia having earnings soon, and some of the other names in this having earnings soon. This is not a bad way to play the chip market. Now it's getting up there, but it's this is looking very strong. Software, which I know we're going to look at, that sort of took the reins early on at the very beginning of this market rally. Now you have software and chips looking pretty strong. That's a real positive. That again shows you some breadth going on in this. Obviously, Microsoft's a big name, and that hit a new high. But there's plenty of other stocks that
Yeah.
had really big weeks.
Definitely. And for individual stocks, just like we like looking at early entries before breakouts, it does seem like a lot of trend lines were cleared this week, or especially today, as you mentioned, for whether it's the NASDAQ, the chips this week, software here. So potentially some early entries, even though we've been running, just like with anything, make sure you have that risk management in place, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's cap our ETF look with XHB up 2.1% on Friday after last week's big week. We saw a little bit of a pause here and now an attempt at a continuation of the move here, Ed.
Yeah, so and obviously the lower interest rates were driving a lot of this initial move. So that's, because and why why the home builders sold off too.
Right.
So that's still very interest rate driven. It's interesting because the 10-year yield was actually flat today. How well the market did, how well XHB did today in that context. It doesn't mean that can stay forever. But it's nice to see that group again. Leadership maybe can repair. There's a few names that look better than XHB, but maybe some breadth of leadership, some repairs has been taking place in the last couple of weeks. So still has work to do, but looking a lot better.
A lot better. And you mentioned the yield. So here's a look at 0 TNX for the week, up a little bit, but that comes after last week's decline of 5.2%. So right at the 10-week line, a technical level, but maybe calming down here a little bit.
Yeah,
Lisa,
I
it'd be
think
nice to see if we can just, stabilize. I know that's something you've been talking about.
stabilizing may be all we need. Yeah, and I will say we have inflation reports, we have retail sales. It was a very quiet week for economic news. I know Powell spoke, but it was very quiet for economic news, so that could disrupt it. But yeah, it was nice to see the market rally so nicely today and for the week, despite yields rising.
Mhm. Okay, let's take a look at some stocks. TSM has been mentioned, so let's take a closer look. Up 6.4% today in some heavy volume after a couple of tight days right around the 200-day line. So strong October sales. Give us more information, Ed.
Yeah, it was 15.7% versus a year earlier. And you can see the past 3 quarters, year over year, sales have been down, earnings have been down. So suggesting that maybe we're going to get a turnaround, coming in. So, and Taiwan Semi makes chips for Apple and NVIDIA and Broadcom and Qualcomm. They buy chip equipment from Lam Research, Applied Materials, KLA, and a lot of those names we're doing really good things today. And not, so it was a big bump from the prior month. So those are all things there. It got above the 200-day line. It got above a short-term high. You could probably draw a trend line. There's all sorts of reasons why you could have decided to do an early entry. But again, even if you don't care about that, just the signal it's giving for chips,
Right.
because that's like, oh, well, maybe this is turning around. If this is turning around, that's a really good sign for a lot of other things.
That makes sense. Okay, next on the list, let's take a look at MercadoLibre. This was today's stock of the day. It now has a handle. We had at the beginning of the month a strong positive reaction to earnings with some volume. And taking a look at the weekly chart here, it does seem like 1400 a key resistance level here for the stock to clear, which coincides with the handle entry, Ed.
Yeah, so one of the best things about Thursday's pullback is that you had some of these things that were just like these tiny little wedgy things. It's like now
Yeah.
there's a bit of a shakeout. I mean, not that look, this is not a tremendous pullback, but it's something. You can at least see it. So that handle will show up in an hour or two on MarketSmith. Uh, Strong, the volume dried up this week. It was strong volume the prior week. The earnings and sales growth are ramping up. So there's a lot to like about that. If we can get above those levels, we could even try to get in a little early, like with that sort of trend line that you did there, just sort of like popping above, and just looks like something that could be gone if it seems like it's in pretty clear entry here, if it can break out of that.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have to see if this one can get up and going because it's been trending higher, but it's been a hard stock to hold for traders who use our style of trading. I mean, I think even if you were to have gotten an early entry in this one at the beginning of the year, I mean, those couple of trips to the 40-week line, that would have been kind of hard to hold. But I think the appeal here is the strong growth. So now let's see if the stock can, the stock action can support what we're seeing on the fundamental side, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's had a decent year, but you're right, it's so difficult to hold with those pullbacks. And yeah, again, if we could just have a nice trending market for a little while, a lot of these stocks might be able to get enough momentum. So even when they have their pullbacks, they can still, investors can still hold on to them or cash out with decent gains.
Right. Exactly. Okay, and last on the list, let's take a look at GE. We've talked about how this has been such a great trending stock. Took a breath finally to form a base with a depth of 11%. It's now working on the right side of that base of 5.8% this week. RS line blue dot ed, some volume coming in. Taking a closer look at the daily, what do you think about where's the buy point here?
I mean, the buy point is, right at the 117.96, but I think you could have bought it today. I mean, I think, I mean, that trend line is going to give you just the tiniest decline because it's so narrow, but I think that 114.89 was a nice short-term high there, and it got above there. It's still very close to the 50-day line. Yeah, I agree with all those things. The RS line, yeah, it paused, but you can see the RS line didn't fall. An 11% decline after that strong run, given how the market was reacting. And, industrials, a lot of industrial names had really a tough time. This is more getting into the aerospace kind of world, but, and, it's going to become a pure play next year, but the growth is tremendous. So it's not like a 7% grower, like boring stock right now. Lot to like about it. There's definitely, I know I showed a couple of tech names, but there were a lot of stocks, aerospace, there's some retail, there's some financials. There's a lot of different names that are actually working. So definitely people should be looking at their watch list to making sure you notice stocks like these, because these are definitely worthy stocks to be considering.
Mhm. Okay, and now we have to talk about what investors should be doing to prepare for the week ahead.
Well, again, I think really building up on your watch list, there's some stocks that are now extended, maybe dropping off your watch list, and there's other names that you might not have thought of, like, well, now MercadoLibre has a handle. There's things like that. There's some of these chip names that you hadn't really been paying attention to. They're coming up. A lot of stocks have now come up that probably are actionable or close to being so, and you just want to be ready to do that. And then again, just take it day by day. If things are working, add incrementally. If you've been doing that, it doesn't take long for 5%, 10% to get you very exposed into this market. And I think that's the way to go. Obviously, if just know that, have a game plan. If things start pulling back, how are
Mhm.
you going to handle that? Because, it all looks very easy when stocks are going up, but just make sure you have a game plan for on the downside. But then to stay engaged when we get back on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another thing too is traders may be getting really excited seeing
Yes.
stocks making big moves, but chasing has its risks. It's not ideal to be chasing a stock above a proper buy point or chasing when a stock gets too extended beyond a moving average. So keep those ideal entries at the top of your mind as well. So we'll keep
Always
that.
good to keep. Always good to keep to stay in check. Keep your
Yeah.
emotions in check.
Yeah. We'll keep that front and center with building those watch lists this weekend, as you suggested, Ed. All right, everyone, that is it for today. Thank you for tuning in. We will be back with more Monday morning on IBD Live, and we hope you join us. Investors.com/IBD Live for all the details on that. We will see you there, and we'll also see you back here Monday at the close.